Hello, everybody. It is me, your boy, Oliver Hoots. And today, we are going to be looking at something very special. As you see, I've brought my massive TV so that you can see the program. What we'll be going through today is lost episode creepypastas, particularly bad ones. Now, I spent a good amount of today reading creepypasta. Lost episode creepypasta. Some good, most bad. Creepypasta is my favorite. I enjoy creepypasta very much. I think it is a very interesting. It's very interesting to see independent writers creating scary stories. However, some of them are just so edgy and don't make much sense. And today, we're going to be looking at those. So, get yourself comfy. Try not to fall asleep. Let's go through 9 lost episode creepypastas. Now, I figured we would start with not only a classic, perhaps the most famous example of a lost episode creepypasta. Okay, that's awesome. But, yes. Nice library. Thank you. It has many lost books. Good to see you, Taco. Now, let's begin with probably the most famous example of a lost episode creepypasta. One of my personal favorites for being extremely edgy for no reason. Graphic content warning. You're not going to be seeing anything disturbing, but the things I will be describing can be quite gruesome and vivid. That's part of the nature of creepypasta. They are extremely edgy. Jack the Ripper. There's what do you mean, Jack the Killer? That guy? Jeff the Killer? No, we're not doing that one. We're doing lost episode ones. So these are creepypasta that are basically just super edgy fan fiction. They all involve a pre-existing TV show, and they all have. I'm trying to see. Let me look at all the ones that we have. All of them have a very consistent theme of being extremely edgy out of nowhere and for no reason. I'm going to quit stalling and just jump right into it. We're going to start with a classic, the most famous lost episode creepypasta, Squidward Suicide. This one in particular is very edgy. So, content warning. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer in the end, prepare to be disappointed. There just isn't one. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. I wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't. But it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but most kids at the time would shit themselves over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right into it without giving too much unnecessary details. I had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the season. The delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere. I set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and 2 interns were in the editing room, along with the leading animators, sound editors with Final Cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty, gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that this isn't the final, yet animators often put a mock title card, sort of an inside joke for us. Phony, oftentimes lewd titles such as How Sex Doesn't Work instead of Rockabye by Val. When SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw the title card, Squidward Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. Happy-go-lucky music plays as is normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says, okay, and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. Bubble splash screen comes up. We see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things begin to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves. The sound doesn't. At this point, the sound is synced with the animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There's slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing that is common in the show. You could very clearly hear malice. Squidward's in full frame and looks very visibly afraid. Shot goes into the crowd. SpongeBob in center frame. He too is booing, very much unlike him. This isn't the oddest thing though. What is odd is that everyone had hyper-realistic eyes. Very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes. Something a bit more real than CGI. Pupils are red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question the appeal of children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. View out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is the point there is no sound, literally no sound, not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, so their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, tentacles, over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute more. All the while, sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing, barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through the forest. The screen slowly began to zoom in on his face. By slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at it 10 seconds apart, side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit. There's a twist on itself for a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the tree sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is this sound, and Squidward sobbing, sounded real. As if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes. The sound was coming through the other side. Got some good sound. They got some good sound equipment at Nickelodeon. As good as sound studios have to have, they don't purchase equipment to be that good and produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind sobbing, very faint. Something sounded like laughing. Came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second. They had a hard time pinning it. We watched this show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific. I had a lot of time to think about them. Marie. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred, twitched violently. Something flashed over the screen, as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animator paused and rewound frame by frame. What he saw was horrible. It was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. Face was mangled and bloody, one eye dangling over his upturned face. Popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open with entrails laying beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. Why? The most upsetting part is that the shadow of the photographer. This was no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designated to be evidence. We've seen the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, pressed on, hoping it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing louder than before, half body and frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. Blood was also done in hyper-realistic style. Sorry, hyper-realistic gets me every time. Looking as if you touched it, you get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if there were that of a gale blowing through the forest. Good? Yeah. I'm just reading a lot, don't worry. They were very snapping. I'll be taking breaks in between them, don't. There were even some sounds of branches, laughing, a deep baritone, lasting at long intervals, becoming more frequent. 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. Oh god. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but we knew we had to. This time the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl. No older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach. Her parrots in a pool of blood next to her. Left eye was too popped out and popped. Naked except for underpants. Her entrails were piled on top of her. Another crew cut along her back. And the body was on the street. Target's shadow was visible. Very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit. One intern, the only female in the room, ran out. Show resumed. Why do they have to do this? They're not. It's not like they're the police. It's not like at that point you probably would just want to hand it over to the police. You can't do anything. You're just giving yourself more trauma. No, we had to. Okay. After about 5 seconds, after the second photo played, Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when the scene started. Put his tentacles down, and his eyes were now done in hyper-realism, like the others were in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot and pulsating. He just stared at the screen, as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud. The most fear-inducing of all was the sobbing mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, so did the deep-voiced laughter. This time the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. Animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy, about the same age. This time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out of stomach wound by a large hand. Right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down. Animated proceeded. It's hard to believe. The next one was different. Couldn't tell what. He went on the next same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. Animating its sound editors gasped at the screen. It's really our edgy, right? The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They played as if they were frames from a video. Saw the hand slowly lift out the guts. Saw the kid's eyes focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. Yeah, also, I don't think any of them are this bad, except for the last one. So if this one's kind of making you uncomfortable, don't worry. There's not too much left of it, and then the next ones aren't that bad. Okay. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call on the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived. Within 15 minutes, he was confused as to why we'd called him down there. So the editor just continued the episode. Once a few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face, for about 3 seconds. Shot quickly panned down. The deep voice said, "Do it!" And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth, pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him. In his bed, flies back with the force. Last 5 seconds, this episode shows his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling at what's left in the bed of the floor, steady blinking at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hellenberg is obviously angry at us. He demanded to know what the hell is going on. Most people left the room at this point. Just a handful of us to watch it again. Hearing the episode twice only served to imprint the intensity of it in my mind. It caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we come up with was that the file was edited by someone in the chain from the drawing studio to here. CTO was called to analyze what had happened. He announced that the file did show and edited over new material. However, the timestamp was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined for foreign software and hardware as well as glitches. As the timestamp may have glitched and showed the wrong time. Everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened to this day. No one does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos. Nothing came of it. No child seen and identified. No clues were gathered in the data involved. No physical clues in the photos. Never believed in unexplainable phenomena before. But now that I have something happen, I can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence. I think twice about things. And that wraps up Squidward Suicide. There is a video someone made. But we're not gonna watch that. I'm sure that one's probably gonna be against TOS. It's not really. It's really, it's on YouTube, but still, we're not watching the video. I don't know if I'd get in trouble for that. I feel like just reading it's fine. Twitch really don't like that. I know, Twitch really don't like that stuff, though. Oh, hold on. Alright. Take a quick break. Just sit here. Drink a little bit. The next one. Yep. So this one's actually like a really famous creepypasta too. I'd say it's really up there in terms of people knowing about it. People like this one a lot too, which I'm kind of surprised by because it's extremely edgy. Like it's really, really just like, oh, Siren Head. That's an SCP, isn't it? Even then, today's focus is on Lost Episode. I'm pretty positive Siren Head's an SCP. It's a whole different thing. I think SCP is way better than Creepypasta. I think it's actually I think it's fantastic, actually, but it too has its really bad ones. Siren Head looks good, but I actually haven't read that one. My favorite one is, I think it's called like the Doomsday Machine. Like it's like the Eye of Jupiter. Really cool. Actually, if you go to my YouTube channel, the stream is still archived there of me reading bad SCPs. Maybe later we can do a stream where we do like good SCPs or like maybe even good creepypasta too. It's also not that long. It's only an hour and a half. Remember? Maybe even shorter. I don't know. I remember it not being very long. I also remember when I started streaming, I did really short streams. One is oh yeah, an interesting fact about Squidward Suicide is the creators, like the animators, actually made a reference to it in an episode. That episode got, then they had to edit it out because people were pointing that out, and then Nickelodeon's like, "Oh no, we can't allow that." Bad. Okay, is everyone ready to move to the next one? The next one also has to deal with SpongeBob. The main reason I chose to do this one next is because it actually throws shade at Squidward Suicide. I think it's funny. Okay, so let's do the next one. This one is called Plankton Got Served. I'm sure many have heard of lost episode creepypastas. They are usually an incredibly graphic episode that conveys such fear for children that it was never aired. But someone managed to sneak a viewing or owns one of those tapes. The most popular example of this is Squidward Suicide, in which Squidward commits suicide, hence the title. Of course, all of these creepypasta are false, but I remember a SpongeBob episode that was altered heavily. It still remains in circulation today. This is One Course Meal from Season 7. In this episode, Mr. Crab finds out that Plankton is horrified of whales and uses it to his advantage. This is one of the least popular episodes of the show due to the dark nature of the episode, even after the episode was heavily altered. Now, how would I have seen this episode before it was edited? It's simple, really. This is one of the 7 SpongeBob episodes that was revealed on the internet before it aired on TV. Always a big fan of the show, I was excited of the idea of having a SpongeBob episode premiere on the internet before television. I rapidly reloaded the Nick page. Finally, the episode came up. It was known as Plankton Got Served, though it was eventually changed. Most of the episode is identical to the one that's in circulation today. Plankton manages to break into the Krusty Krab, ties up Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob. He is about to finally get the secret formula from SpongeBob. Mr. Krabs' daughter, Pearl, walks in. This terrifies Plankton, causes him to run out. Plankton later claims his ancestors were eaten by whales. This is why he fears them so. Mr. Crab realizes this fear that Plankton has, decides to use it against him. He dresses up as his daughter, begins to follow Plankton around, frightening him. Plankton decides that he can no longer take it, decides to make the ultimate decision. Plankton decides to commit suicide. Yes, this is still in the show today. You are free to watch it. Plankton waits at the bus as he lies in the streets, waiting to get run over. That is when SpongeBob comes over and tries to convince him to continue his existence. This is where the alteration in the two versions begin. Plankton fails to heed SpongeBob's words and remain there. In the altered version that was shown, SpongeBob tells Plankton that it was Mr. Krabs as Pearl the entire time, and he gets up. In another altered version, SpongeBob says the same things, but Plankton refuses to believe him. SpongeBob decides that the only thing he can do to show him the truth is to drag Mr. Krabs outside. Soon after he leaves, a typical red bus comes speeding along. Plankton sits up and watches it hit him as everything fades to darkness. Now, some of you may say you saw the show as soon as it came online, available online. Apparently not fast enough. Just seeing the episode online, I reloaded the page to find the altered version show on the website. Kept reloading, curious if I'd seen the first version. The only answer I could imagine from my viewing of the original episode. My apologies, I skipped a fucking paragraph. Plankton finds himself staring at a single platform overlooking darkness. In the darkness he sees whales, all looking up at him. They're members of his family he can faintly make out, calling for him to jump down. Plankton looks above and sees a light he can scarcely believe. This would seem to represent heaven and hell. Plankton, resigned to his fate, jumps and plunges into the darkness. That's where the episode ends. The traditional credits of the show are shown, parallel to Plankton's descent into madness. Keep reloading. The answer I can only imagine when viewing the original episode is that the creator has uploaded the wrong file. Moments after uploading it, recognized such. I may be the only one who saw this version. I truly do not know the sick ambitions of the creators of SpongeBob had in mind with this episode. Why would a kid's show portray death? Why would a kid's show portray heaven and hell? Nevertheless, the unaltered version is impossible to find. I've searched as hard as I can, and I've failed to find anything legitimate about the episode I have seen. People have told me that I have seen only the altered version, and they too were surprised at the dark themes portrayed in the episode. Nothing less. I know what I saw. I know people would fail to believe me. People would accuse me of just trying to scare people. People would say I have no evidence. There are no photos. There's no video evidence of this occurrence. I only saw it once. It never occurred to me to do such. I know the truth. I want other people to know it as well. Maybe someone out there saw this episode as well and I can confirm it. Till then, I hope you enjoyed reading about my experience. Just came back to SpongeBob. Yes, welcome. We are doing Lost Episode Creepypasta. Basically, they're all really edgy fan fiction. In this one, Plankton commits suicide. In one we read before, Squidward committed suicide. yeah. Taking a short break before we move on to the next one. I'm just talking about stuff. Okay. Give it a second and then we'll move on to just trying to rest my voice a bit. Don't want to overdo it. Want to make sure we can get through all 9 of these. 2 down, 7 to go. The next one is pretty long. Try to space them out properly, but oh, I'm sorry, that was really loud. Thank you so much for the gift sub. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Holy shit. I need to fix that. Why is that so loud? No. Well, thank you so much. Like, wow. Um, only one for now. Oh, don't worry about it. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. You don't have to sub, by the way. I really, thank you. So I wasn't expecting that today. Okay. Okay, before I just keep giggling like an idiot, let's move on quickly. Thank you again. Okay. So the next one we are doing is Willy Wonka beta tape. School tomorrow. Awesome. Hope you have a good 3-day weekend. Okay. Let's begin Willy Wonka beta. I had heard of many stories and rumors that there was a secret hidden story behind the Willy Wonka story, but I had never really believed them. I thought of them as nothing more than mere jokes and or fan fiction. You know, how people like to take things that are normally thought of as happy and whimsical, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Leo Wonka as a pedophile or some shit like that. I never took anything like that seriously and just thought them to be things people with active, albeit creative minds have come up with. To me, the Wonka story is nothing more than happy and innocent story made for children to enjoy. At least, that's what I thought until the day I decided I would actually find out for myself. I decided to mail someone who was once equated with Doll. I was told not to give anything about this person away, just to see if any of this was true. Considering nearly everyone had said something about this story obviously having some sort of subtext about it, I thought I would check to be sure. I was told in the mail, and I quote, "You seem interested in the subject. Many people prefer to speculate, but you are the first one who actually seemed genuinely curious. Seeing as you want to know as much as you do, I will send you a tape in the mail. Check it within a week." It was a couple of days or so later, and the tape finally arrived. It had the words, "True Story of Willy Wonka," written on it in black marker. The only other words on it were at a copyright dated 1963, a year before the book had come out. First I thought that was strange, considering VHS tapes were not around back then. Then it occurred to me that it was possible it had been on film and put on tape later. So I struck the tape and played it, after rewinding to make sure. Come on. Come on. Come on. Started out a bit odd. For one thing, immediately went into the title, taken directly from the first edition book cover. No fade, just sort of popped in, causing me to jump. What also made me jump was what came after that, the delayed yet abrupt appearance of the music, which was loud, sounded like some fast, angry jazz music. Anyway, went on to the credits and showed the names I had never seen before. The only names I was able to recognize were Dolls, Trisha Neals, some guy named John Black. I kept looking back to the names of the animation checker about 15 times. I genuinely thought there was something wrong with the tape. As I was about to take it out, popped immediately in the outside of the house with the buckets with the camera zooming in. The art style was really weird. It was black and white, had an odd, misty, cloudy look about it. Crosshatched. There was a deep male voice that seemed most likely to be the narrator. The voice was in horrible quality. It was muffled at such a low volume that I could barely make out a word he was saying. Cut inside the bucket's house. The misty cloud look was even weirder here. People moved all wavery and wouldn't stop moving, much like those old Zelda CDI games. The shading was crosshatched, which means that there was a lot of extra movement. Something it was hard to make out what was going on. Characters behaved oddly. It seemed Charlie was either gay or highly effeminate as he spoke with a gurgly voice, spoke of his love of dolls and princesses. It seemed everyone feared Grandpa Joe. Found out later he was involved in World War I, and it was never explained how. It seems clear he was responsible for ending it. Charlie's parents also displayed odd behavior. Dad seemed depressed, and the mom seemed paranoid and suffered from a major form of obsessive-compulsive disorder. The other grandparents never spoke at all. Here on, it's not too different from the book, except for the characters and the fact that Charlie sings songs about his dress he wishes to wear. The story about Wonka is slightly different. Apparently, he's a Grinch that happened to appear out of nowhere, suddenly owning an impressive factory that no one saw built. Seems here no one worked in his factory, nor did it ever have any problems causing it to shut down. But when Charlie finds the ticket, it happens halfway through the finding. Also, we don't see any other kids giving the interviews as they win. The messages on the ticket found in the book, or in any film adaptation, is absent. In fact, the ticket is blank. No mention of it being gold, but it's black and white, so it's hard to tell anything. So, anyway, big day came and everyone is waiting at the gate. Very similar to the book version, except there are 6 kids and Charlie is wearing his dress and the lines are spoken by the people, slightly changed from the book halfway through. Now talks of Wonka being a Grinch, how his factory got there, how it got made. There's a story about Princess onto Cherry's death, having died drowning in Wonka's chocolate palace. Talk about more stuff. Then it seems the wind picks up, drowning them out. But nothing is ever seen. Blowing, there's just a sound effect of a howling wind. There are bells that chime for what at times the gates to open, just like the book. Surprisingly, I can hear it over the loud howling wind. It hits me that the chimes are not church bells like the book describes. They are funeral bells. Very weird. It's not the weirdest part. The weirdest part is Wonka himself. When the door swings open, you see a dark, shadowy figure stand at the doorway. And then Wonka comes out of the factory, hopping and prancing. Certainly does not appear human, though it is somewhat hard to tell due to the style of cross-hatching and lack of color. Again, this isn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part is the eyes. It had a reptilian stare and quite literally sent chills down my spine. His hair kept moving. Not because of the consistent motion and cross-hatching. Just moved like he was underwater. Wind was even louder now as he pranced and hopped down the gate. Once he arrived, he spoke, strangely. His voice loud and clear, even though the cheering and talking from the audience was barely audible. His voice was high, like explained in the book. Not the kind of high voice I expected. It sounded like Michael Jackson speaking seductively. As normal, the kids had to show him their tickets. He stuck down his pants and then walked inside. Wasn't that different from the book from here on, except that they started down the hallways. It looked like demented Tim Burton style artwork. It kept getting more narrow and kept sloping down more and more the further they went. It also seemed to twist more as they entered each new hallway. Baka! The weird part is that there's no dialogue here except a line from Veruca about needing to use the loo. Her father tells the probably won't happen till the end of the tour. It's also a slow rising in the howling winds from earlier. I found it strange that such a thing would happen. Again, in the factory. They entered an even more twisted and looping hallway, funeral bells chiming once again. They went, "Woot! Woot! Woot! Woot!" The odd thing is that the art style. The art style once entered this room changed completely, while still being remained crosshatched and wavery. Looked to something Tim Burton might draw. Narrator from earlier also returned, but he was somewhat clear. Saw the same voice clip where I recognized a few of the same inflections. Ali didn't seem to be having talking about the buckets like I expected him to. He was going on about hoot, hoot, woo, hoot, 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 hoot. Okay. Still found him hard to make out, but I managed to catch a few words such as Grinch, Wonka. You went on to some about the Oompa Loompas. At this point, I had goosebumps. I actually did not want to know what he was trying to say here, but I was still very curious. Then, everything got interrupted by a long message found on a black screen with white text. The writing was in another language. It looked like an odd mixture between Greek and Korean. Somehow managed to look like Blackadder ITC. But somehow managed to look like Blackadder ITC font. There was no sound at all here. Everything was in total silence, so the howling wind shut up abruptly a couple minutes in. I expected it to return to the show here, but it went on for a few more minutes before it returned back to the show. They continued to walk through the twisted halls. This one looks particularly messy with shadowy figures of Wonka and the gang walking through. Changed to a side view, and everyone was still black and shadowy. Wonka was still hopping down until an abrupt change. The funeral bell sounded again. Then he was walking slowly. The way he was walking reminded me very much of The Undertaker from WWF, specifically in his Ministry of Darkness days. No. You can't do this to me. It's not fair. Other than the obvious, what was so freaky is the fact that it happened abruptly with no transitional frames. There was again no dialogue aside from one of the kids, I assume a girl, saying, "I don't like this, Daddy." Suddenly, they walk through the chocolate room. No door or entrance. They just walk in. All sound is gone. Each one that actually shows up is distant, echoey. They get here. It starts to get really strange. The room looks eerily identical to the one in the 2005 Tim Burton ad. The film is not crosshatched, but it looks like a black and white painting style. Chocolate River. This one is of more unsettling moments because the river looks like real blood, the only colored element in the entire film. Not blood done in realistic style, as though someone actually dipped a brush in a cup of blood and ran a brush across these parts. But blood turns brown after it is painted because it oxidizes due to the iron content in it, so it returns to rust. It made it more unsettling so the textures would change slightly with each frame. Quite unsettling because how are they able to get so much blood to make up each possibly 700,000 or more pieces of paper? That isn't the weirdest part. It gets worse. The room doesn't seem to function normal as Wonka is not introducing anyone to the room, nor showing them around. Suddenly starts talking about the Oompa Loompas, proof of black pygmies he smuggled from Africa illegally, he adds. Jeez. Aye. They are then shown. But the unsettling part is that they are unlike in the book, which they're all happy, cheery, and always singing and laughing. They look miserable. Suddenly look at Wonka. They look terrified. Give him a look that basically says, "Please don't kill me." I actually heard one of them say that. I couldn't quite tell if it was kill, as he was far away and sobbing. It had more of a sound of ack rather than kill. The camera from this point stayed at bird's eye view. Wonka then yelled angry at the Oompa Loompas in a ridiculously loud voice. It's loud, high-pitched, and screechy. Couldn't even understand him. He could have been speaking another language for all I know. Then he turned back to his guests and said something to them that sounded so shocking and despicably racist. Then it continued to get worse. By the end, what he ended up saying was just plain abysmal, as well as slightly terrifying. I won't even repeat it. It was so bad that even a white supremacist would be offended by it. Now, I'm also not that super sensitive, politically correct type that thinks blacks can... Oh! Not racist either, even I was distraught by what he said. The salts were revealed to be racist. Not surprising. But even they were offended. Anyway, the old Viking boat arrived, but it had some odd reptilian designs about it. Getting got in, I heard Veruca say, "Daddy, I want a lot of things, but I do not want a dreadful boat like this." That was all I could hear. Gang did talk. Their voices were drowned out by a group of crying Oompa Loompas that were really loud sailing with the boat in the chocolate blood river. Ay, ay, ay. No. They ended up going through a pretty dank tunnel. It was very close to the one in the film from Gene Wilder, you know, psychedelic tunnel ride. But I could barely make out any of them. They were in the style, made everything look so convoluted. Ruka Hey man, if you regret that, I can let me know. I'll see what I can do about getting you a refund. And about her underpants being drenched in pee. Sixth Child was another girl. Spoke of some of Violet's lines from the film. Was this a freak out? Absolutely baffled as to who this was, though. And just making sure. I want to make sure you can take care of yourself. Absolutely baffled who this was, though. So Augustus was gone, though I assume he fell into the chocolate river. Anyway, Wonka sang his rowing song, like in the film, though he sang it closer to how Marilyn Manson sang it, but with extra vibrato. Fast, angry jazz music from the intro shows once again. Seems odd, not a place. I keep seeing the letters Hey B pop up in the background. John Black? Then the images became clear. Background image shows Oompa Loompas crying, similar singing in some kind of African language. Then Wonka starts turning into some kind of bizarre language. It sounded like some kind of Yiddish chant. So halfway through, it started sounding like a hint of German. His eyes got bigger, his mouth grows larger, his teeth make a sudden change to being sharp and snake-like. And paused right over his face. In a few minutes, funeral bells rang. Narrator from the beginning shows up again, halfway through, rather than staring out from the beginning. His voice is now clear. He mentions the Oompa Loompas being illegally smuggled in the deep forest in Africa, and what peacefully lives they lived. It was shocking to mention the horrid things Mr. Wonka did to smuggle them. Again, I will not repeat them. It's about to speak about what happened to them, how the factory got there, but immediately skips a room where I can make out anything goes on. No one said anything about it. I would have never guessed this was the inventing room. From here on, just keep skipping to different rooms, a child disappearing each time. Here, however, seems no one knows how they disappear. Sixth child, still know who she is. Heard someone refer to her as Miranda, unless that was one of the parents, who are mostly unnamed in the book. I'm pretty sure they're referring to his mysterious sixth child. At least she spoke when the name was said. There were funeral bells, so it was hard to hear if she responded to them. Anyway, the last room that appeared and features Wonka making sick powder. Sixth girl does not seem very pleased about it. Wonka gets extremely angry about this and shouts angrily right in her face. Once again, loud, screechy, and unintelligible. Fact is, it was not distant and made it even worse. It sounded so loud it even echoed through the room. Girl runs inside the door to where it's being made. And it cuts to Wonka's face, slowly zooming in closer and closer. He had a huge rapish grin about him. Rapish? Rapish. Okay. Rapish. Rapidash. Rapidash go. Very spooky. Very spooky indeed. I love this sentence. Very spooky. I hated to keep looking. I had to see what was to come, so I reluctantly did so. Some weird noises that resemble one of those creepy background sounds. Music? You're on something like the History Channel. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you're hearing it right now. Wonka's face. It zooms closer, starts to show something disturbing texture that kind of looks reptilian. Here's his eyes are getting wider. His pupils morph into slits. His teeth once again become sharp and snake-like. Everything goes silent. The black screen appears once again, looking like the half Greek, half Korean. Now Wonka began to chant something It sounded like Yiddish, clearly a different chant than last time, but showed hints of German, albeit more than last time. Text then flickered to an English translation, but it happened way too fast for me to stop and read it. Then went back to where it was in the still picture of the group standing around the room with nothing but funeral bells being heard. It lasted a few minutes, and it started to go in motion again once the funeral bells sounded. I heard someone shout, "Miranda!" So this is her name. What? Are you watching this as you're writing it? Whatever. Anyway, these two ran off in the room as Wonka stared down at Charlie. Honestly, I'd practically forgotten he was here because he was barely shown throughout the whole thing. In fact, Violet and this mysterious Miranda girl was shown the most. I almost felt like Mike and Violet were not even in this one, considering their names were never spoken. I almost had forgotten that he was in a dress. Probably thought it was Violet or something. I didn't speak again and remembered he was gay/highly feminine. Wonka went on to tell him he'd won. Instead of taking him directly to the great glass elevator or whatever, told him to wait a minute, and hopped off into another room. He found every one of the other kids in here except for Miranda. It's something that I did not understand. It was English, but had a rather convoluted meaning. Children lying on the floor could be heard crying and moaning, similar to Oompa Loompas. Parents could not be seen anywhere. He then turned on the radio and slowly began to strip. What then gave me goosebumps was playing on the radio methodically. It reminded me of one of the songs you'd hear in an old Mario game when you fight Bowser. Despite it being in the typical style you often hear during the 60s, such as the Beatles and the Monkees. What the fuck are you talking about? But it was one singer only. He began to strip. The only thing that gave me goosebumps was playing on the radio. Methodically, it reminded me of one of those songs you'd hear in an old Mario game when you fight Bowser. Despite it being in the typical style you often hear during the 60s, such as Beatles and the Monkees, but with only one singer. Oh, God. Glad my voice is calming. It also sounded as though the keyboardist did not know exactly how to play it right. But that wasn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part is this. Now it sounded distorted and like an old radio, like it was from the 60s. It was more in the background, a little harder to hear. Also because it wasn't super loud. Anyway, I couldn't pick out the exact lyrics, but I did hear him mention some freaky shit that would happen to a bunch of different people by 2014. It was like a bunch of names, random names being sprouted out. He obviously seemed to know who they were. They were going to happen to them. It's too horrible to mention. I don't even remember half of them. It took a second for me to sink back in the video as my mind drifted away, absolutely stunned by the music. When I did, I saw Wonka take off his shirt and throw it, and finally slowly drop to the ground. The credits rolled, all sound was gone. From here, appearing again with odd names from the intro, I could only see if anyone on after this, only find a message placed in it, and it seemed to be put in later as a look, quality, and style of it, early 90s feel to it. It read, "Don't let Felicity know," then the tape stopped. I did not know who Felicity is until I looked up and found it was the name of Doll's second wife. As you may guess, I was quite shocked by what I had seen, but also relatively confused about what any of this was. I went and asked the person who sent me the tape. He told me, obviously this was how Dahl had originally written the book. He'd always made films of these books before he wrote them so he could keep track of every idea he had and also check and see if the lines these characters spoke worked outside of just being read. What happens from there and he ended up the way I really do not know. Not know him long enough, but I started to question the man after I got a hold of his tape. I asked if a person wanted the tape, but they refused to seem glad enough to get rid of it. Even though they did not want it to be gone forever, they still wanted proof of the information to stick around. Ever since I saw this tape, I'm looking for it around and seeing any information on anywhere, and so far, I cannot find anything. Jeez, this one. great. So we can talk about how this doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Hold on. Yeah, the reading music. I kind of like that one. He always made films of these books before he wrote them, so he could keep track of every idea. That making a film takes way more. Reading music is fun. Yeah, I like it. It fits. It's the same music you hear in other creepypasta reading streams, which is why it's perfect. But creepypasta reading videos. Actually, what's the guy's name? Hold on. The guy who makes them all is called Mew. Mew on YouTube. MYUU. They make pretty good like piano music, and their stuff gets used in creepypasta stuff all the time. Go check them out. But making a movie takes a ridiculous amount of work. So like, what are you talking about? Also, the to see if the lines these characters spoke worked outside of just being read doesn't make any sense, since you would want the book to read like work good as a book. Then when they make the movie, they're gonna change lines anyway. So literally, it doesn't matter what it sounds like in the book, because they're gonna do revisions. It happens every time. The book is like this movie was too. Okay. By the way, bad one. Also, some I ended up reading that were not very bad. Like this one might be the worst one. Let me see. They're all like not great actually. All the ones that we picked. Some of the ones that I found, while I was looking for them, weren't that bad. Either they just were, a cut of the movie where like the hero loses, or and it was actually attached cut to the film, so like and it's nothing like creepy, something that could have happened, it just didn't. What else was there? There was another one where it was like it was just about an entirely like new show, and like there were just a few episodes that were like pretty creepy and dealt with like some really messed up stuff. But that one was a little much, but like I think it was controlled enough to where it wasn't a problem. Lucas King makes awesome music, don't know about. Oh, well, yeah, let me write that down. I'll check it out later. Maybe we can do it for the next music for the next reading stream if they're cool with it. Post. You can. Don't know when that'll be though. It's been a long time since I've done. But this stuff's fun. I like doing streams that aren't just playing a video game. It's nice to be able to just read some funny creepypasta. Bloodborne. Bloodborne's good. Okay. Just a little bit. Drink. Okay. Did a little bit of stretching, a little bit of sipping. So let's go to the next one. Next one is also a famous one. I'd argue it's the second most famous one. No. That's tough. I would say there's like Squidward Suicide, then there's like 3 right under that fall into the same level of fame, and this is one of those. The Ed, Ed, and Eddie lost episode. As you may know, the popular show Ed, Ed, and Eddie has been running for a long time now. However, between October 7th, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. Also known to some around the office that the primary writer had been sick with the flu. Instead of going on to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1. 5 a.m. Eastern, people reported a very disturbing new episode premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre and held to regular standards. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre when held to the regular standards. Animation was choppy, sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down similar to a crappy VHS tape were received. The scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing without changing props and other background objects, stormy looking. Characters also behaved oddly. Instead of the normal, goofy, hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful towards one another, and consistently began sobbing about the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why. He spoke with a sexual tone, further bothered the viewers. I was one of those viewers. The episode began with Eddie walking down the street with Ed. I noticed that Ed was missing. There was an angular shot coming from front of the two to show them walking towards the viewer. He, Eddie, were wearing the angry look he does when something goes wrong. Eyes are red around the iris. Ed looked absolutely forlorn, practically dragging behind Eddie, tears in his eyes. Both lazy, looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series antagonist, was riding his bike opposite the Eds. Towards them, the shot became blurry, and low moans were heard coming from Eddie before Kevin hit him. Which never happened because the screen went black. The screen then snapped back to Kevin. Kevin was headed towards Eddie. He was so blurry this time, all saw was a green blob headed towards a yellow one. Again, a low moan, only this time it sounded like a microphone was broken. Low static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. Claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddie's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered, waking up and getting out of bed. He moved oddly around the circular room, fast-paced pitter-patter, footsteps being the only audio. Step sounds were very clear, and I was shown a bird's-eye view, scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Ed began screaming. It sounded like a fisher cat. As he moved wildly around the cell of a room faster and faster until the screen began blurring again, open room's color swallowing a now orange blur. Ed began screeching. Extreme close-up of Ed's front door sat in absolute silence for a maddeningly long time. At least 2 minutes of dead silence at the door. Next, we see Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor's of some sort, probably oral. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, is crying loudly, with Sarah trying to comfort him in an unusually warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah, it hurts." Suddenly, the door of the room is smashed open by a new character, Dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room. Jimmy was shown. His headgear was mangled, front bent upward, stretching his lip, very high tearing proportions. In front of his gums was trickling blood. Teeth were missing. The stirring part was he had lost both his arms and legs beforehand, apparently. He sat a paraplegic? Okay. Fucking 0 to 100 real quick. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion the others had beaten him up and bent his headgear. The camera stared at his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf, dark and shed, fisting the cow. Winding that back. We are instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf, is dark and shed, fisting the cow repeatedly. Visual loops and gets blurry again as the screen pans out. Okay, I read that right. Has us reading a magazine on her couch. Quality is now perfect. Ed is now alone. Eddie's now alone. Without Ed, quality declines worse than before. She's still waking, the sun now lighting the mood somewhat as he smiles and begins running. Door showing in her silhouette at Eddie's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played piano is blaring. Okay, sorry. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring. The only audio in this scene as he makes his way through the house. Eddie opens the door to his room. Wording there. Either way. Penny shown under Naz's couch cushion as he crawls out from all fours in a comedic way, pops up behind her. Still oblivious, I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eyes, and I thought of a mole. Suddenly I stopped laughing, as he started voring her head. Still in her cartoonish fashion, of course, but this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and screaming. Johnny held her head like this till she went limp. Zooming on his face revealed extremely small, human eyes. Though he was laying on Eddie's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddie's house for the remainder of the episode, about 3 minutes. The next program began on the spot. I'm actually gonna leave the music on for the rest. Maybe not, I don't really. At least let this one. Maybe when the song finishes, we'll go to the next one. It's Ed and Eddie Lost episode. That's yeah. It's kind of really random. Sorry, I'm being silent right now. I'm just trying to give my voice a little rest before we move on to the next one. I find the next one more interesting. I find it mainly because it's kind of based on something real, but not quite. Hydrate? Oh, of course I'm hydrating. Don't worry about me. I have this planned. I'll be fine. We're getting through all these. Still have 5 more. At least 2 of them are kind of long. Might end up taking a break at some point too, just get my get a good rest. But for now, just continue on. It's a little scratchy. Okay. Save this one for the reading show. Glad you do. The Black Friday incident. To give a little context to this one is actually kind of true. There actually was, basically, I need to know, it involves like a test screening of Toy Story. In the first test screening of Toy Story, in the original test screening of Toy Story, basically, Woody's a fucking asshole. Yeah, yeah. This is just kind of, they took that and then made it even more spooky. So let's go into the Black Friday incident. Early stages of production on the film Toy Story were a complete nightmare. Production was in a sort of development hell until the infamous Black Friday incident. Disney harassed the then new animation studio, Pixar, consistently. They were to produce and release the film. They wanted results as quickly as possible. Disney tried everything to eliminate Pixar's efforts to deviate from Disney formula, even at times threatened to shut the production down. Disney sent note on revisions that they thought would improve the film. They insisted, though their notes, which all read, "Edge. Film needs more edge." People working on the film at the time struggled so hard to maintain all of Disney's notes and demands. Once a week, they were required to fly across the country to the Disney offices to present them progress. Every time they met with the same response: edge. Film needs more edge. Pixar revised the film so hard, the deadlines, that it resulted in some rather interesting changes. In order to achieve edge, the film began quite a lot darker. Woody became a wildly unlikable character, much angrier and far less comedic than the final film. Bo Peep's role in the story was far more prevalent, often flirtatious towards the male characters, and is the first to accuse Woody of pushing Buzz out of the window. Buzz Lightyear was referred to at this point in production as Lunar Larry, who was highly reminiscent of an older superhero, talking in a deeper voice. He was even more deluded and ignorant of his surroundings. The other toys were relatively unchanged, save for minor aesthetic differences. Pixar employees worked literally 24/7 non-stop. Director John Lasseter joked on more than one occasion that he had the best parking spot at the office because his car hadn't moved over 3 days. Some of the writers and storyboard artists began to suffer from chronic insomnia. The writers reported seeing visions of Buzz and Woody taunting them on the lack of progress, chanting, "Edge! Film needs more edge!" Many of the initial writers quit due to the stress it was putting on their personal lives, much to the stress of the remaining crew. By November of 1992, there were two of the 5 writers left, only one of the 3 storyboard artists. The remaining storyboard artist was named Ralph Thompson. He joined the Pixar team in the writing of 1987, before working on short films such as Tin Toy and Knick Knack. He, at the same time, did some storyboard work for The Nightmare Before Christmas with fellow artist John Ranft. Joe came down with serious illness and been able to work in a week. Ralph worked consistently, fear of the inevitable correction by Disney. More edge, more edge. Each presentation meant another row of sleepless nights, rewriting and redrawing the same characters in the same bedroom over and over and over. It was maddening. One morning, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, and other high-ups at Pixar came into the office and told everyone what happened at their last meeting. Disney felt that things were not looking very good for the film and demanded that, in less than a week, they see the complete film and story reels, storyboards with audio. massive revisions. There was a general ground and whining from the crew. Went back to working. Ralph worked harder than all others involved. Sometimes, 2 o'clock in the morning, one of the writers would walk into Ralph's office with a pack of newly written scenes, more to draw. More drawings meant more scratch voice work. When film's still on the writing started with trades, artists will do temporary voices for the story reels. He had Disney's vague instructions racing through his mind. More edge, edgier, more. We want results, people. Edgier. This is a business. Faster, more edge. Move on already. He thought to himself, this exactly. The film needed an edge. It needed to be darker, more cynical. It needed more adult humor situations. It needed an attitude. Of course, Ralph, you couldn't see it sooner. Goddamn. Edge all hundreds of the desk. He needed was edge. Why didn't he listen sooner? Gave the film an edge. Just gonna scroll past that bit. There we go. Hey, Naruto. Welcome. Just reading some Creepypasta. Story reels were flown over from the main crew to the head offices at Disney. Date was November 27th, 1992, Black Friday. The film was brought into the Disney screening room. The reel was about 48.5 minutes long. The movie started as a Western-style shootout before Woody and Andy resulted in Andy being shot down. It was revealed that this was just a gameplay inside of Andy's mind. The film continued on with little problems for about the first 20 minutes or so, though several gags seemed off with the overall tone of the film. For example, Mr. Potato Head would pull out one of his eyes and kick him under Bo Peep's dress for a look-see. There were several scenes of Woody yelling at the toys to stop caring about Buzz and Larry, pay attention to him, culminating in insults and minor acts of violence. The scene came when Andy could only take one toy to Pizza Planet, and Woody pushed Buzz out the window. Woody offers to shake hands with Buzz Larry, only to throw him out of the window. There was a stock smashing sound. The other toys were shocked and agonizing Woody for what he'd done. Woody showed little remorse and screamed at the Slinky Dog to make the toy stop harassing him. For much yelling, one of the Green Army men saying the word "God damn." The toys grabbed Woody and tossed him out the window. Held on to the ground with a low thump. Cheering was heard from the interior of the house. The quality of the storyboard became much less refined and almost like chicken scratch. Woody got up and saw Buzz, Larry. Buzz's body shattered on impact. Arms and legs were broken off and located a few inches away. There was a large crack down the middle of his chest, revealing a mess of buttons and wires inside. He gave off a sort of electrical twitch motion in his head. His eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of their plastic sockets. Twitching stopped after a few minutes. Woody looked in fear at what he had done to Buzz and ran off. There was a jump cut to the scene where the two got stuck in the claw machine. The storyboard art was back to normal level of quality. The scene was filled with sunglass-wearing pizzas as opposed to the aliens in the finished movie. Buzz was completely unharmed and intact. The scene was almost identical to the final film. Sid, the antagonist, is in control of the claw, wearing a yellow t-shirt, smoking 3 cigarettes at once. Claw grabbed Woody and Buzz, Larry, putting them in the clutches of Sid. There was another jump cut, once again returning to the chicken scratch style of artwork. The scene was inside of Sid's room. Woody looked around the room in fear, tiptoed around the room and collapsed after seeing one of Sid's mutant toys. The reel now showed unrealistic test animations of the character running. A few seconds of Buzz running in place, seconds of Woody running, nearly a minute or two of running together. Footage was distorted and Spanish text was present on the screen. Looked like clay models that got life. There was now a shot of Woody standing in front of a black background and the trademark Pixar ball was rolling around in the distance. Animation was now in the traditional animation style of a typical 2D Disney film. Whatever. Woody was completely naked, with anatomically correct features. Stared directly into the camera. Just began to rot away with the exception of his eyes, which remained intact. Woody began to moan in a low voice. Reminded the lips curled into a smile, bits of flesh peeling off as it happened. He lifted up the decomposing arm manually and waved it to the camera. His fingers dug into his eyes. Dark blood oozes from the sockets. Woody began to scream and growl. Do you want it? Don't you want it? Don't you love it? Don't you want it? No, I don't believe you and say that you don't need me. Okay. He dug so deep to rip the entire top of his head off. Woody gave a sigh of relief and began eating the flesh off the skull before tossing it aside. He wrote the word edge on the screen with his rotting fingertips. The remaining 15 minutes of the reel were pencil scribbles accompanied by the shrill screams of a young woman. The word edge was burned into the projection screen. The screening ended. What happened? Screen ended in complete silence. Chairman Disney Jeffrey Katzenberg walked out of the office quietly telling his colleagues notes. These were all following and notes were given to them. Upon returning to the Pixar office, writer Pete Docter found the body of Ralph Thompson in an enormous pile of papers in his office. Further analysis found that the cause of death was a heart attack brought on by lack of sleep and stress. Papers were all storyboards and animation cells with the final coherent scene of Woody. The word edge was scrawled on the back of each one. Black Friday screening. Disney was far less involved with the film. Pixar was given to make the film their way. Found to be a huge success both critically and financially. The Black Friday incident still remains very much a mystery. For further information, there's a clip on the Blu-ray that actually exists of something kind of like what he described, but not nearly as edgy and fucking dark. It's just the beginning part. And Woody's an asshole. This is from like a real old test animation Pixar did of Woody, like way in the beginning. Completely unrelated. Okay. Okay. You are about halfway done. I'm feeling pretty good. I think I will do one more and then we'll go to BRB for a little bit. Probably just like 5-10 minutes so I can catch a quick break, refill my drink. Just yeah. Next one's pretty short, so let's do that one first. Like the ring, take a drink now? I will. Good drink. Okay. Now. And the next one is also a... It's one, one most people are familiar with. Well, in terms of the lost episode Creepypasta. Some would argue it's almost as famous as Squidward Suicide. However, I find Squidward Suicide more funny. But let's press on. With Dead Bart. Yeah, Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes. He refused to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for that is a lost episode from Season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. While it was being pieced together, the lost episode was written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first episode, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemingly nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present resulted in him getting angry, forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt. First I ever heard of an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode. Silverman simply left the stage, and the presentation hours early. Episode production was 7G06. The title was Dead Bart. Episode labeled 7G06. Moaning Lisa was made later and giving Dead Bart production code to hide the latter's existence. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about this will cause them to do anything they can to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd. Eventually had a chance to talk to him alone, leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I had followed him. Probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all color drained from his face. He started trembling. I asked him if I could get any details. It sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me, begging me never to mention this episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I'd rather not say what it was, for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser, came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text. Download link. I clicked on it. The file started downloading. Once the file was downloaded, my computer went crazy. It's the worst virus I'd ever seen. System restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD, tried to open it on my now empty computer, and as I expected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. Now, since the episode started off like any other episode, it had very poor quality animation. Seeing the original animation of A Chanted Evening was similar, but less stable. First act was fairly normal. The way the characters acted was a bit off. Homer seemed angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa seemed anxious, Bart seemed to have genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taken off. Bart was fooling around as you expect, however. The plane was about 50 feet off the ground. Bart broke a window on the plane and was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, I had an idea that the animation style of the Simpsons world represented life. Death turns things more realistic. This was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. I took full advantage of it not moving to make it almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at the table, crying. Crying went on and on. Got more pain, sounded more realistic, better acting than you think possible. Animation started to the character more as they cried. You could hear murmuring in the background. Characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring, looked like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces looking in the window, flashing in and out, so you're never sure what they looked like. This crying went on. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletonly thin, but still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted. As they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was just lying in front of the tombstone, looking like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped, stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this park, but it isn't audible in the version I saw. Can't tell what Homer is saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. Tombstone in the background had the name of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some no one had heard of in 1989. Some of them hadn't even been on the show yet. All of them had death dates on them. Or guests who died, since like Michael Jackson and George Harrison. Dates were when they would die. Credits were completely silent. It seemed handwritten. Final image of the Simpsons family on the couch like in the intros, but all drawn in hyper-realistic, lifeless style. Bart's corpse. Thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of the living Simpsons guest stars. Something odd about most of them who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed at the same date. Spooky. Be spooky. Okay, so turn the TV off real quick. Okay. So we going to go to BRB for a minute. Gotta go to the bathroom, get something to drink, rest my voice for a few minutes, 5 minutes or so. Once that's done, we'll come back and we'll finish up the last 3. So, I'll be back in a bit. You all just sit tight. Ready for more Creepypasta. Hello, I'm back. Is it Animal Jam music? No, actually, it's from Goya. No, I have it linked in my about section. It's a Japanese site where you can get copyright free songs to use, like background music. It's good, great site. They also kick people off who copyright their stuff. So if you copyright your own stuff after you put it on there, you are not allowed on the website. All right. Got 3 more. The next 2 aren't too long. This one is the OG. Hey, it's Rainsy. What's up? Good to see ya. Reading Creepypasta. Got back from break. Okay. We have 3 more to do. We are going to start with this one. When's the last time you drank something? I just refilled my drink while I went to BRB. I've been sipping on this drink. Been good. I'm staying very hydrated. However, reading for 2 hours will still kind of mess up your throat. So, gonna get through these last ones. Will be great. Oh, hey, Jesse. Glad to see you made it. You missed some of my favorite ones. That's okay. There's always the VOD. I highly recommend. What was it? Oh, yeah. The Willy Wonka beta tape. And was hilarious for so many reasons. Okay. So, this next one is the original. Well, it's considered at least the original lost episode creepypasta. So, let's get it. There's even a video made to go along with it. Very cool. Let's go. Guess you had to censor yourself this mod now. Don't worry. The only thing you just can't say anything that like is against terms of service. You can like swear whatever you want. But let's go. With suicidemouse.avi. So do you remember those Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s? The ones that just put out the DVD a few years ago? I hear there's one that's unreleased even to the most avid classic Disney fans. According to sources, it's nothing special. It's just a continuous loop, like Flintstones of Mickey walking past 6 buildings. It goes on for 2 or 3 minutes before fading out. Unlike the cutesy tunes put in though, the song of the cartoon is not a song at all. It's just a consistent banging on a piano for a minute and a half before going to white noise for the remainder of the film. It wasn't the jolly old Mickey we've come to love either. Mickey wasn't dancing, not even smiling, just had a kind of walking as if you or I were walking, with a normal facial expression. For some reason, his head tilted side to side as he kept this dismal look. Up until a year or 2 ago, everyone believed that after it cut to black, and that was it. When Leonard Maltin was reviewing the cartoon to put in the complete series, he decided it was too junk to be on the DVD. He wanted to have a digital copy due to the fact that it was a creation of Walt. When he had a digitized version of his computer look at the file, he noticed something. The cartoon was actually 9 minutes and 4 seconds long. That's what my source emailed to me in full. He's a personal assistant and one of the higher executives at Disney and acquaintance of Mr. Maltin himself. Basically, my dad works at Nintendo. After it cut to black, stayed like that until the 6th minute before going back to Mickey walking. Sound was different this time. It was a murmur. It wasn't a language, more like a gurgled cry. As the noise got more indistinguishable and loud over the next minute, the picture began to get weird. The sidewalk started to go in directions that seemed impossible based on the physics of Mickey walking. The dismal face of the mouse was slowly curling into a smirk. On the 7th minute, the murmur turned into a blood-curdling scream, the kind of scream painful to hear, and the picture got even more obscure. Colors were happening that shouldn't have been possible at the time. Mickey's face began to fall apart, his eyes rolling on the bottom of his chin like two marbles in a fish bowl. And his curled smile was pointing upwards to the left side of his face. The buildings became rubble floating in midair. The sidewalks were still impossible to navigate in warped directions. Few seemingly inconceivable what we, as humans, know about direction. Mr. Malton got disturbed and left the room, sending an employee to finish the video and take notes of everything happened up to the last second. And afterward, immediately stole the disc of the cartoon to the vault. The started screaming lasted until 8 minutes, a few seconds in, and abruptly cuts to Mickey Mouse face at the credits at the end of every video. It sounded like a broken music box playing in the background. This happened for about 30 seconds. Whatever was in the remaining 30 seconds, I haven't been able to get a sliver of information about. From a security guard working under me, who was making rounds outside the room, I was told after the last frame, the employee stumbled out of the room with pale skin saying, "Real suffering is not known," 7 times before speedily taking the guard's pistol and offing himself on the spot. Such a fucking rude way to put that, but alright. I think I could have let out of Leonard Maltin was the last piece of Russian text that roughly said, "The signs of hell bring its viewers back in." As far as I know, no one else has seen it. There have been dozens of attempts to get the file on rapid share by employees inside the studios, all of whom have been promptly terminated of their jobs. Never got online or not is up to debate. If rumor serves me right, it's online somewhere under suicidemouse.avi. Never find a copy of the film. I want you to never view it. Contact me by phone immediately, regardless of the time. When Disney death is covered up as well as this, it means it has to be something huge. Get back to me. You have to find a copy of this, but if it's out there, I know. Laugh whenever someone dies, because usually it's super like edgy and like out of nowhere. Also, the phrasing of that, offing himself, just something about that's like, oh, okay, yeah. Just highly disrespectful. It's never like, it's always extremely, it's always just so, like, it's too much. It's too much. I have no control. Hey. I really do like that emote. Um, looking, making sure everything is actually. I know that's kind of late, but I'm weird like that. Already done that like 3 times. Everything's pretty good. I have 2 more after this. So let's go. I know. I can do it too. Um, yeah, let's go to the next one. The next one, the next one is interesting because it's from something that I'm not sure all of you are going to be aware of. Most of these are based on things that are extremely big in pop culture, such as Simpsons, Mickey Mouse, uh, SpongeBob, Ed, Ed and Eddie. Wait, collect your feathers, man. That's okay. I just keep falling out. The wonder I'm not bald. So yeah, the next one is on a show that I'm not sure a lot of you would be that familiar with, since it was a live action show on Nickelodeon, and it was kind of just like a game show. It's called Legend of the Hidden Temple. This one is one about a team on Legend of the Hidden Temple called Yellow Frogs. If you're unfamiliar with this show, it was kind of like one of those, like, it was an obstacle course show basically, but they'd have kids and it had this whole like Mayan Aztec theme. It would have this guy, Kirk, the host, and then the other host, I guess, the god who's supposed to run this temple, Olmec. Yeah, there is a lost episode creepypasta of this. So let's just jump right into it. Most viewers are unaware that there was a seventh team that was in the original true pilot episode. Okay, that's a really weird way to just phrase that. Yellow Frogs were the seventh team. The team featured a golden yellow t-shirt and a dark frog for its iconic symbol. This made the team stand out, as all the other teams had a yellow logo on their colored shirt. This pilot episode was never shown on air, or only an unedited version of the tape exists. This is due to the horrific, unexplainable accident that took place on set. Only a handful of people have ever seen the tape, and there was no audience at the time since it was just a pilot. The episode was called Skull of Akamapekithili. The feature architect was the skull of the first leader of the Aztec people. It had made its way to the hidden temple by unknown means. It was placed in the throne room on the chair. Skull teams ran through the various obstacles, the Moat, stats of knowledge, several games. The Yellow Frogs were a powerhouse, and they were able to compete in all the challenges first. However, there were several strange mishaps along the way. The Moat. It was a very simple first challenge. Both players had to cross the moat by walking on a rope bridge with the rope above them they could hold for support. The moat would also have a flow of water it made similar to rapids, which made it hard to cross, so it would try to knock the player off. Everything had gone well for the first member of the team, crossing it with little trouble. But as soon as the Yellow Frog's second member stepped on the rope, the water turned a dark red and began to heat up. Small rapids became very strong, started rocking the rope harder and harder to try to knock the runners off. Splashes from the red water that touched one of the runner's skin would start to burn. Some of the runners got scared, turned back while four of the teams continued on. Unaware this was not part of the game, Yellow Frogs was one of the four that made it across. As soon as the last team crossed, the moat returned to its normal color and temperature. Staff ruled that the machine that controlled the water was tampered, but the video surveillance did not show anyone around the machine. Steps of knowledge. Burns were not that bad, thanks to the waivers the parents had signed. cannot be held liable for the physical damage to the kids. The producers decide to carry on at the steps of knowledge. Teams were provided a short story of the skull of Akamapakithli. When Olmec, another episode of the show. First, Olmec was acting normally while telling him the tale of... I'm sure if I heard it pronounced, I could pronounce it fine from then on, but I'm not sure how that is pronounced. However, whenever Olmec spoke with the great leader's name, the big stone-faced statue would slow power off when his mouth was wide open, speaking in a low tone that sounded demonic. He would have a few staff members run over to check the malfunction, have to reset Olmec. After the third time, the stone face spoke his name and the mouth opened wide. A large group of Cyclocosma spiders sprang out of the mouth and began to attack the nearby staff. After attacking the staff, they all ran into a nearby moat and drowned themselves. Some of the staff were bitten and rushed to a hospital to receive medical treatment. As the runners were not attacked by the spiders and the producers did not care about the staff, they decided to proceed with the game. The remaining staff members were able to get Olmec turned back on and continue the story. So Olmec finished the story. His huge red eyes began to cry the same red water that been in the moat. Right as he spoke the last word of the story, his eyes burst into flames. Staff ran over to put the flames out, investigate the red water. It looked and smelled exactly like blood. He could not come up with an explanation except that it was a prank by one of the staff members, maybe a disgruntled member who had not paid enough. The yellow frogs and the silver snakes were the teams to reach the bottom of the steps and move on. Temple Games. Temple Games are about the same as any other episode. Physical obstacles that relate to the artifact of the episode. Nothing out of the ordinary happened to the actual games. There was something eerie in the air. Random sounds started to come from the temple, such as birds chirping and frogs croaking. When the children thought they had saw someone move up in the temple, they could only make out a shadow of a person. The temple had already been set up for a temple run, so all the remaining staff were out front helping, and there should be no one left inside the temple. I sent in a few staff members to take a look to make sure that it wasn't some staff member or one of the children who got lost running around. All I could find were the doors were open and had originally been shut. Yellow Frogs had won the second and third temple games, making them the winners. They were only awarded 2 pieces of the Pendant of Life, unlike later episodes, and be given a full one winning the third game. This would mean that the second runner would have no Pendant of Life going into the temple. If they're caught, it would be game over instantly, without a way to protect themselves. Seriously, the show was actually kind of fucking cool. Temple Run. It was time for the Yellow Frogs to run the temple. First, the children were afraid to continue on after all the evil and disturbing events that happened. Producers came onto the set and reassured that these events were just pranks by a crazy staff member that caught them and that there would be no harm done to them. Children still refused until the producers offered an additional 1,000 prize for just entering the temple. This is enough to make the children enter. Too much money had been spent on creating this show, and they had to make sure the pilot was completed. First to enter was the girl. Host gave her the spiel about entering the temple, as well as the prize information for retrieving the skull space camp. She was given the only Pendant of Life and began her run. Made her way up to the steps and entered the room of the 3 gargoyles. Was immediately met by a temple guard. And was forced into giving up her pendant. She continued on and was doing fairly well until she had entered the shrine of the silver monkey. She began to grab the pieces to make the silver monkey. A temple guard appeared from the door. The temple guard was dressed differently from the first one, though. Instead of its iconic feather hat, it wore a large skull with horns and was covered in blood. The temple guard quickly grabbed the girl and she was pulled through the door, slamming as she went through. It happened so quick it was a blur on the video. Right as the door shut, you could hear a blood-curdling scream, but it was mostly masked by the music. The boy entered and began to run through the temple the same way the girl did. The boy navigated the temple until he reached the throne room and grabbed the skull. Should have unlocked all the doors and made the remaining temple guard vanish. Instead, all the doors in the temple suddenly shut and locked. Temple guard entering from the back door, also wearing a scarf with giant curled horns and blood all over. The temple guard, however, held a giant green stone knife and was slowly advancing towards the boy, suddenly screaming with rage, shouting words that no one understood. He attacked the boy with his giant knife. The boy ran through the back doors as the guard chased after. As soon as they went through, the doors slammed together. Another blood-curdling scream was heard. Host ran to the back of the temple in fear that children were hurt, while the staff called the police. When the host arrived, one of the members of the camera crew, all they found were 2 sets of human bones and skulls to match. Both were wearing the yellow frog shirt. The artifact was nowhere to be found, and there was no place for anyone to hide back there. Temple guards have also vanished. Police show up investigating the scene. They figured it had to be some hoax or some type of prank by the children's staff, because even if the children were murdered, they would not suddenly turn into bones. It was obviously a setup. Took the bones to a forensic analyst and began to search for the studios of the children to arrest them. Analysts who investigated the bones was able to determine that they were real human bones and that they're all matching. Police still believe it to be a prank, but they refuse to give out any additional information to the public. Missing children have not been found to this day. Aftermath. In order to keep this from the media, show producers had to pay off everyone to keep quiet, including the parents. They also retired the yellow frog team by burning the shirts as evidence so no one find out about the events that happened. Some say the skull was of the true Akamapakathali, and then bringing it to the temple, it made the temple cursed. Some say the temple guards took the children were real Aztec guards whose job was to protect the remains of the great ruler. Now returned to the spirit rail until their revenge on the thieves who stole the skull. Some say the missing children were offered as sacrifices by those guards so they may rest in peace. They're fucking everywhere. They're fucking everywhere. Can't even get a fucking bad creepypasta without someone making a JoJo's reference. That's pretty spooky. That was pretty good. I was just really surprised to see there was a Legend of Hidden Temple. I was also glad to see that it was on the perfect level of shit to be in the stream, baby. Alright. We only have one more. Now, like the first one, Squidward Suicide, the last one also is pretty graphic in description, like what actually happens. I'd say this one actually probably gets worse because it's more... It takes longer, more emphasis on the actual... It's not just like, oh, it cut to a frame of someone doing it. It's like the whole episode is supposed to be like this gruesome thing happening to this character. But you won't fucking believe who it is. In fact, I want you to guess who it is. Well, some wild guesses. I'll give you a hint. He is a fucking... Well, it's a he. He's a character that was an icon in, I believe, the 90s. Let me check this real quick. Make sure. Yes. No, 80s. Sorry. He was an icon on TV in the 80s. Unless no one wants to guess. It's fine too. I mean, you'll know what it is in a minute. You have no idea? Alright, well. It's Alf, baby. That's right. Ah. Alf autopsy. Alf. You know Alf? You know Alf, right? Everyone knows Alf, right? The alien life form? He, I just googled it. Yeah, he would always like joke about like eating the cat because he thought they were like really tasty. He thought they looked really tasty, and I think they would eat them on like his planet. I think that was the bit. Okay, this is the last one. This one's kind of long, and like I said, there's another warning for this one since this one actually gets a little fucked, honestly. It's Alf. It's Alf. Okay. Remember Laserdisc? No, me neither. I'd heard of them, but never seen one, as the format was extremely rare in Europe. Until I went to Japan about 5 years ago. I got this reputation as being country of the future. And yes, there is technology everywhere, some of it cutting edge, but you're also just as likely to find fax machines, toaster ovens, punch cards, floppy disk, and indeed, laserdisc. In Osaka, Japan's second largest city, a giant what? Megalopus? I've never heard it referred to that way. Megalopus of epic overpasses and neon lights. Laserdiscs are ever turn readily available in Den Town, the city's electronics and otaku heaven. Laserdisc lined shelves along VHS and DVD. I was over there at work as an English teacher, but in my spare time, I wandered around the multitudinous alleyways, subways, and high streets. Exploring, walking, drinking sake one cups, and eating takawasa and gyoza at all hours. District of Denten Towni, also known as Nipponbashi. There's plenty of interest in Western tourists. There's plenty to interest Western tourists. Many cafes with young ladies and saburete cosplay serving tea from bone china teapots in response to the delicate little bells placed on each table. Multi-story manga and anime stories with several feet of Gundam guarding the doorways. I remember a strange, unmarked doorway. The only information on the sign outside being a colorful drawing of an angry carrot with muscular arms wearing high heels and stockings. Never stepped through the door, and probably never will. Another thing that you need to know about Japan as a whole, and Osaka in particular, it has a homeless problem. But I think every major city has a homeless problem. There seems to be no support structure for all the people with social problems, unemployment, poverty, drug dependence, any attempt to sweep them off sight. Alongside many rows under bridges on traffic lights. Park City's people are living in tents, bivacuoles, small permanent shacks or sheds. Some of these guys are in terrible states. I once saw an old man step on the roadside, shedding bare feet, his toes and toenails so mangled they look like broken bones sticking out of his stumpy raw flesh. Others are fairly well dressed, like salarymen down on their luck. Even Osaka Joe Cohen, grounds to Osaka's famous castle, Tokugawa defeated Toyotomi in 1615, establishing the 250-year dominance of the Shogunate. Shogunate? Yeah. As no shacks and tarpaulin strung between the cherry blossoms. Yeah, I bet you didn't expect this one to be. I bet you didn't expect the fucking Alf one to get all weeb and shit. Despite the number of people living homeless and exceedingly rare, and anyone begging or even busking for change, For that reason, I drew my attention when, one night, while walking into Nakanoshima Koen means park, I saw apparently a rudimentary store. Inside a tiny wooden hut of scrap wood and metal, not big enough for one person to lie down in. Yeah, I know it's weird, believe me. He gets involved. Sat an elderly bearded man in disgusted clothes. Last week he wore plastic bags from 7-Eleven. In front of him, laid on the ground, a square of tarpaulin. There was a random array of scrounged old tat. I glanced across as I continued walking. It's past midnight. But in a place like Osaka, it means little. Restaurants and shops were still open. The park was full of life. Besides the homeless people, there was also the drunk salarymen sleeping off a skin full of sake. Young lovers and practicing musicians. Because of the flimsy nature of walls in Japanese apartments, a couple wanting time to themselves can actually find more privacy in a public park than they can at home. As I continued my walk, I saw a young man practicing drums. He set up a full drum kit with bass drum, snare, toms, hi-hat, and a whole lot, bashing away the grass under the heavy load brought by the cherry blossom. I walked around the path, stumbling back to myself, getting back the way I came. I was getting tired and had to be up early, enjoying the sights in the moonlight. As I walked past the old homeless man, the second time was accidentally made eye contact, just for a second, and we both looked down at the arrangement of objects. I walked past to where he sat and stood by him. Japanese was so poor that when he spoke I couldn't make it out, partially due to my lack of fluency, but was also the tiniest croak in his spoken, fast staccato, like an overstimulating Geiger counter. I tried to mumble a few words in Japanese, soon settled with a "sorry, I don't understand." "Sale ito o cheap," he said, pointing out one of the items of the bundle, and started. A bundle of short electrical cables with the 2 pin plugs still attached. The appliances were still served, nowhere to be seen. Yohakuen. 500 yen, I figured. About 5 USD, 2 pounds and 50 pence British. He pointed to another item, a rubber Anpan man's dolls. Looked like it had been run over by a car. Yohakuen. Instead, a stained, wrinkled softcore porn magazine. The cover starred a young Japanese lady, girl really with painted lips and a black bikini. Yohakuen. Lip cap from a Toyota. Yohakuen. A carrier bag, 7-Eleven containing a small pot of partially smoked cigarettes. Yohakuen. A dead bird. Yohakuen. Small pair of trousers that look like they'd recently fished out of Osaka's many rivers. Yohakuen. We still haven't gotten to Alf yet, by the way. A 12-inch cardboard square sleeve with a disc inside. Yohakuen. Bent to get a closer look. Cardboard had once been white, and had clearly been soaked and dried out once or twice, stored in damp conditions. It was written in wrinkled and peeled, discovered with filth. In the corner, I can make out the image of 3 eggs in a line, initials NHK written across them, the logo for Japanese Public Broadcasting Station. I picked it up and turned it over. On the back was some faded handwritten kanji, which I had no chance of depicting, and the katakana E le fu Aleph. I tipped the sleeve sideways, let the disc clip out, and my hand to the point where I started to see some shiny blackness of vinyl. Instead, I saw the silver laser discs catching the streetlight, shimmering veins of electric blue like motor oil on water. Even so, there was significantly scratching in the odd patch where the aluminum surface is peeled, revealing the plastic beneath. Hey, you're finally getting Alf! Hey. Also, writing some good writing advice. Just because it's longer, doesn't mean it's better. It means that you wasted our fucking time. I didn't know what the disc was, and it wasn't convinced it would play at all. I was significantly curious, and the old guy obviously needed the money. Paid him a 500 yen coin, thanked him too politely. Thank you. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. He bowed his head a little, and I set off walking, the laser disc tucked under my arm. 300 feet away, I heard him muttering and yelping. When I glanced back, I saw him looking in my direction. I couldn't understand any of what he said. The wind blew gently, taking his words into the treetops and high-rise apartment blocks. His light poured in the night sky. Now we're getting into part 2. Which is, the actual bit we came here for, actually. I had known a Laserdisc player, so the disc was forgotten for a couple of weeks. Spent some time on the coffee table on the floor under the sofa, propped up beside the TV, anywhere it could be ignored. I had no intention of ever doing anything with it, and clearly I wasn't going to buy a Laserdisc player just to find out the disc was damaged beyond repair. An American friend was over one day and noticed the disc. He asked about it, and I told him how I acquired it. He agreed it looked unlikely to play. Also couldn't read the handwritten kanji on the sleeve. He said he knew a couple Japanese technical experts with the equipment and know how to properly salvage it. He contacted him, and a couple of days later, when he was available, we visited him at his apartment. Most Japanese living rooms had the usual stuff: seating, TV dining, table, etc. But in this apartment, the living room was full of sound and video equipment, computers, digital and analog tape decks. Wires stretched and tangled everywhere, monitor screens and speakers in stacks. Took one of us to look in the Laserdisc and agreed that there wouldn't be much surviving data, but what there was he could salvage. He had a high-end player called Muse High Vision, so it could read through defects that a normal player couldn't. Entering it through a processing amplifier into a capture card, one of his many PCs, and special software connected. He told us we need time to clean up and code it, and we should leave him to it, as it would be boring to watch. We agreed, and we went to a nearby bar for a few beers and a couple of rounds of yakitori, grilled skewers of different parts of chicken. Yeah. It's great beer food. Our technical expert friends down when they said to be around to collect us when he finished. 12 hours later, we were nicely drunk and our bellies full of what we began wondering if it would be much longer. Just as my friend was about to make a call, our technical expert was suddenly standing beside our table, his face white and gaunt, withered and bothered, and you expect from someone such a dedication to digital technology. Placed the Laserdisc with its sleeve and a black DVD on the table. Without saying a word, he turned to leave. My friend and I grabbed the detective's shirt with a wait. Despite his reluctance, we got him to sit down with us and had a drink brought over to him. Drank quickly like he couldn't wait to be out of there. Won't answer any questions about what he found on the disc. He said it was all there on .avi stored on the DVD, which should take and go. He really warned us off watching it. He deleted it from his computer, and will advise to destroy both discs and forget about them. I asked him if I could read the scrawled kanji on the Laserdisc sleeves. It meant nothing, he said. Nothing he could understand anyway. He said it was an ancient character set composed to me by trying... He said it was an ancient character set and compared it to me trying to decipher Old English written in the descent Gothic script. He didn't want payment for his work, just wanted to forget about it, but I managed to force three 1,000 yen notes into his hand, thinking repeatedly, gracefully bowing his head, and asked pathetically if he could go now. I said sure, and he got up and basically ran out the door without another word. Where's Alf, though? At this point, I couldn't understand his reaction at all. He was either a very eccentric and nervous man normally, or he had seen something terribly unsettling and struggling in terms of it. We, of course, had had a few drinks, so we dismissed as a weirdo and laughed about it. But in retrospect, I knew his behavior had been understandable. In fact, I think he held it together well just by bringing the disc to us. Had I been in his position, I may have disappeared from contact, turned off my phone, ignored the doorbell until we waited. I may have called the police and reported us for suspicious of committing insane and terrible crimes. I may have babbled and drooled my way into a secure mental institute where I could bang my head against soft walls until I died old and alone, except for the insects of my mind under my skin. Soon we left the bar, excited to get back to the apartment and watch the disc. And to much of my regret, it's what we did. With a few cans of chuhai, keep the drinking mood going. I stuck the unlabeled DVD into the drive of my laptop. There was one file on the disc. .avi with a random alphanumeric name, something like 00A54 blah blah. Double clicked it and full screen the video. It troubles me to think of what we saw, those terrible sights that sobered us up and kept us from finishing our drinks. We kept asleep the last 5 years, effectively ended our friendship, ruined our night, and troubled our lives. Regardless, I'll try to remember all what I saw in the video. Disgusting nightmare vision of what appeared to be the lost final episode of the 1980s American family sitcom, Alf. The conclusion to the cliffhanger, which saw him captured by the alien task force. The video began with a loud, high-pitched squealing, sine wave tearing into our ears. On the screen was a test card of patterns, vertical bands of bright color at the top half, blocks on black, white and gray at the bottom. This remained on the screen for about a minute, occasionally broken by pixelated blocks of digital distortion, the whole while accompanied by the high-pitched sine wave. Suddenly nothing. Black screen silence. After a wait, which felt like minutes, could possibly easier have been seconds. It felt like minutes, but could have just as easily have been seconds. Ugh. The screen flickered like an old video cassette, presumably from an either analog to digital transfer, so the occasional explosions of digital distortion from the corrupted laserdisc. An HK logo began fading into the black background, suddenly glitched out, the screen breaking up into pixelated blocks and shouting out with a burst of white noise that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. The reminder of the flickering screen was a view down a dirty, dimly lit corridor. Floors and walls appeared tiled like some sort of hospital, filthy and damage everywhere as though it had been scenes of floods and massacres. Most of the lights were out. Ones that worked flickered intermittently. The only sound was the occasional electric buzz from the lights, almost too quiet to perceive. All down the corridor into the distant were double hospital doors, small windows at an eye level. Quiet, pathetic whimper, a groan of pain, defeat emerged slowly through the electronic buzz, tearful sobbing of someone reduced to helplessness by torture and humiliation. Suddenly, digital distortion ripped away the image and brought it back, with the camera moving down the corridor, gutturals and screaming guttural roars. Someone in one of the rooms was eventually being subject to a heinous ordeal words could not express, only the scream of unanesthetic cutting and tearing. Until this point, we had fairly good humor about the video. Something about the screaming and sobbing unsettled us. It's not the sound of acting, more like the sound of real agony, the sound of someone being maimed and mauled by the hands, trained in the art of cruelty. The camera continued down the corridor, and the screaming grew worse and worse. Other voices joined in. Various desperate calls and screams in a range of pitches and bizarre alien languages tore as if from beings imprisoned in rooms leading off from the corridor. It howled in response to the pain of their fellow inmate. Screams built and built into a crescendo. Flickering light distortion worsened to the point where the picture was completely obscured. Just as the noise was so bad I thought I would cry. More digital distortion and white noise ripped through everything. The picture returned with an image that shocked us, made us cry out in horror and surprise. Almost an absurd burp of laughter. The chorus of screams was silenced and the image on screen was unexpected to us. A collision of familiar childhood imagery with such unspeakable viciousness. Contradiction that broke our minds. Filling the screen was Alf, an alien life form from the TV series of the same name. Shot was close up, showing his head and shoulders from above as he lay strapped on a stainless steel dissection table. White light poured down on him, out of shot, making the image stark and overexposed, even through the flicker of worn-out video. He lay his head to one side, his fur matted with dark blood and various wires and electrodes penetrating the top of his head. He sobbed gently. Pain was unbearable, genuine suffering which made us desperate to reach out and help a fellow living creature. The expression of pain was both human and animal. He began to turn his head. The effort was clearly about as much as he could muster, and after a few failed attempts and tired whimpers, he faced the camera with closed eyes. More digital distortion and white noise. Then Alf opened his eyes, beaten and bloodshot, strangely human, as though the person were trapped behind Alf's skin. He tried to speak. "Please, I miss you." He croaked. I miss you. His words were translated into Japanese subtitles. All as in the title, the word Alf, big white letters, the familiar font, the katakana Japanese subtitle translation. Alf appeared on the screen, let out the horrendous blood-curdling scream. Out of breath and pain, screaming. He screamed and screamed and screamed. He stared into the camera, his teared-up, dying, pleading eyes, stared at us, at me, and he screamed and screamed. It must have gone for hours. This must have gone on for minutes, at least just when we thought we could take no more. Then the constant scream was eating away at our very souls. Terrible saxophone music started. I couldn't believe it. Along with the continued scream, saxophone-led theme song from the third and fourth seasons of Alf began to play. The same music was somewhat rawer, as if someone pushed overload speakers and re-recorded into a wax cylinder and blasted it again at ear-splitting volume. Thank you for the follow, Saloxi. In between, interspersed cuts of jolly scenes from the past, shots of the Tanner family, credits starring Max Wright and Nadine, random riffs of analog, digital distortion increasing in severity all the time, or images of terrible torture, close up in a hand being drilled, a leg being hobbled with a sledgehammer, all the while that hideous screaming and panting, screaming and crying. Quality of the footage was deteriorating still, and as the happy memories of the torture and miserable walls and distortion and saxophone music began to feel sick. I'm feeling fucking sick. I know, it's so long-winded. All these terrible experiences built up to a roar, and suddenly a video jumped and stuck on a loop. Split second of smiling Willie Tanner, with starring Max Wright, railed across a full body shot of Alp strapped to the tabletop, his torso peeled, revealing the bleeding or insides of alien anatomy. His two hideous images jumping, cutting, looping between each other at irregular intervals. All the while the screaming, the white noise, the distortion lump in saxophone, stuck. I swear over the clamor I could hear the maniacal laughter of Alf himself. I was getting dried hearing you read this. Mine too. Those two images looped for so long that I began to think it was an actual .avi. I was skipping somehow, but checking it, I saw the VLC time slider moving along naturally. Looping continued until more serious distortion obliterated all sounds and visuals, replacing them with pixelated blocks and indistinguishable noise. When the picture returned, of lower quality still, the scene had changed. Camera, now camcorder quality, seeming to be lying lower over to the side table, across the room an autopsy table, while Alf lay strapped down. Lighting was dim, and the green tinge to the picture suggested night vision. The scene was obscured by someone stepping in front of the camera, a person in doctor scrubs, gloves, and apron, all heavily stained with blood and feces. They adjusted the camera slightly and stepped back out of shot. Alf, who may have been laying unconscious, seems to have come and began mumbling and whimpering and begging, No, please, no. His head moving side to side slightly. He appeared delirious, distressed, and barely alive. Doctor walked back into shot, stood with his back to the camera besides Alf and the autopsy table. Don't worry, I'm staying hydrated. His features were covered with a gray surgeon's hat and a face mask. He stood over Alf, looking down at him. He appeared to be talking. Couldn't hear a word he said, just the occasional calm, consistent penetrating through Alf's sobbing and pleading. Slight movements of head and shoulders. The scene remained unchanged, except for the persistent random interference of distortion for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes of inaudible, calm speech, unchanged except for occasional sudden jump cuts to the smiling faces of Kate, Lynn, and Brian Tanner, who seemed to be looking on in curious glee. It was as though the surgeon, the torturer, was explaining matter-of-factly exactly what was going to be doing to Alf. Sobbing and pleading continued throughout, and a brief flash of distortion and white noise leading suddenly to blackness. I don't know how long the blackness here lasted. May not even been on the video. Perhaps I passed out momentarily or shook it just a blank hole in my memory. Never really happened when the picture came back. Scene hasn't changed yet again. The camera was on the move, held in hands with someone I presumed to be the surgeon. Not pointing at anything, but swinging around wildly in the movements of an arm. It was dizzying, producing blurred effects of blood-stained walls, spilled gore to the floor. Soon steadied and swung around the autopsy table, lay a mutilated, headless corpse of Alf. Jump cut to Kate, Lynn, and Brian in happy conversation, camera panning along the body, upwards towards the ceiling, towards the source of the arrhythmic drip of dark liquid. There, hanging by cables and wires, was the severed silenced head of Alf, his scalp shaved and ears snipped off to allow access to the multitudinous penetrating electrodes. Below the stump of his neck hung the spine pulled from his body. Although I didn't notice at the time, in retrospect, it occurred to me that there was something wrong. Obviously, it was all wrong. I mean, there's something not yet expected about the spine. Rather than being the repeating structure of small segmented vertebra, the spine began at the neck with two long, thin, parallel bones which ran the length that determined a joint, connect to a single thicker bone, running down the rest of the way. Thinking back, I've become convinced over time that Alf's spine was not a spine, but the bones I saw were the radius, ulna, and humerus of a human arm. Get it? Because he's a puppet? Okay. As the camera held on to the scene, for a moment the words, created by Paul Fouchel, faded on the screen. Alf's eyes blinked open. He looked directly into the camera. The voice of the cameraman shouted. The voice of the surgeon. The voice of the lieutenant saying, "Good morning, Alf." Alf screamed, a scream of guttural anguish, and the credits sequence rolled. Numerous pictures of Al drinking from the toilet, trying on glasses, peeking through the blinds, wearing headphones, all that stuff. But instead of the theme tune that's playing, screaming, desperate, panting, and crying. Immediately as the video ended, I turned and was sick over the arm of my sofa onto the wall, sick and sick again. Rested against the arm, trying to recover my strength for a minute or two. Eventually I looked over at my friend. He sat motionless, mouth clamped shut and his eyes widely empty. Hands held out from what could have been shrugged, beginning or even praying. I called his name and got no response. I shook him by the knee and the shoulder and called his name again and again. Suddenly, he snapped out of it. Life came back into his eyes, just a bit. Looked around the room, as if wondering where he was, and over at me. We looked at each other, shocked and disbelieving. I felt the rise of more vomiting, rushed to the toilet, and heaved and spat and sobbed in my mouth and nose. As this was going on, I heard the front door close. When I came out of the bathroom, my friend had gone, so the laserdisc and so had the DVD from my laptop. The disc tray was open, the VLC was open to the desktop, the file was gone, but I wanted to play again. I definitely did not. I wouldn't have been able to. After I cleaned up the vomit and failed to contact my friend who wasn't answering the phone, I went to bed and failed to sleep. I lay for hours staring at the ceiling with terrible images running through my mind. At one point, I thought I heard a voice somewhere in my apartment and managed to buck up the courage to investigate and find no one. Turned to bed with the lights on, drifted off eventually. It's a terrible, indefinable nightmares. Woke up with my own urine. I can't even remember having done this before. I didn't see or hear anything of my friend again. Over the time grew more disinclined to contact him. Now if I saw him in the street, I think I would turn and walk the other way for fear of what might happen when shared memories get together again. After watching the video, I suffered severe sleep disorder and have been through therapy to try and quell the constant obsessive repetition of unwanted extreme mental imagery. A few months after watching the video, I returned home to England and I haven't returned to Japan since. Although it was 5 years ago, 6,000 miles away, I still cannot get away from it. I carry the imagery with me in the head. I expect my old friend does too. And I know where he is or how he's doing. Last week I received an email headed Alf Autopsy from one of these anonymous temporary accounts. I deleted the email and powered down my computer. Alright. Fuck, that one was long-winded. And that's why we saved that one for last. Never know it was an Alf creepypasta. Way through. This one was awful. Yeah, this one's particularly bad. I think this one's particularly bad, mainly for the it's just so long-winded, and like there's so much stuff that's like redundant and could have just been taken out. He literally could have just said, "Yeah, I bought this fucking laser disc from this creepy dude," and then after I got it, I had taken it to the like a tech guy. Tech guy was able to like get it, but he was very creepy about it. And then once I actually watched it, it was some fucked up shit. I don't know why it had to be like this whole thing. It was going on about like Japan and stuff, and Osaka's homeless problem, mentioning what they ate, and going on about yakitori. Like, what's the point? Ooh. I know this. Night Sonata. I'm just gonna leave that on. Wow, we were literally almost done. Okay, yeah. That's it for the creepypasta. If you know any other ones, maybe like other lost episode ones that are really bad. I looked through. I looked through a lot of the lost episodes. A lot of them weren't very good. Sticky Stickly is probably the worst one, since it's literally just a build-up for fucking Candle Cove. Is an actually pretty good creepypasta. That they're just like, reference that. And then we have like a Seinfeld lost episode. I've never even seen Seinfeld. I have no concept what that even be. Willy Wonka beta tape might have been my favorite. For like what, the like casual racism, the really weird shit, the so much just bad shit now. You get some after this. Yeah, because everything was so spooky. Sleep well. I hope you have a good night's rest. Enjoy those emotes. Well, emote. We're gonna get more in the future. Enjoy the emote. Use it everywhere. Have a good night. What else was there? I looked through. Gordon's Candelabra was actually pretty good. Gonna dream about Elf. Okay, if you want to help sleep, quickly go watch some fucking Elf clips, because Elf is really just like, he's just like a goofy alien. He doesn't do anything. It's not spooky at all. Should help. You realize, okay. This is Alf. Lighten the mood a bit. Plankton Got Served. Oh yeah, we did that one. That was one of the first ones we did. What? It's just Alf. I mean, yeah, it's not a good show. It's just a shitty sitcom from the 80s, but he like died. He's fine. He's Alf. Should happen every fucking week. feel so fucking old right now, dude. Like, nobody knows who fucking Alf is. I've seen a little bit of Alf. I never watched. I don't know what to expect. It's not good. I feel like everyone knows who Alf is. That's not true. Young people have no idea what Alf is. I feel like I'm too young to. I feel like I'm too young. I shouldn't know who Alf is. Yeah, I feel like he kind of still kind of exists in like pop culture, but he's dying. He's definitely dying. I don't think in the next generation they're gonna know much about it. What was another one? Oh, it's Godzilla versus Destroyer. I immediately wanted to do that one since I like Godzilla. So I read through the whole thing, and yeah, it's actually not even that bad. So I just didn't bother. Okay, okay. You want to see something kind of funny? I don't know why. Just Mr. Beast there is really funny to me. Like Honey using him like sell their shitty service where they just sell your info. Uh, I love you, Mr. Beast. Please donate. Ah. I'm not gonna lie, this stream has already been a lot longer than I expected it to be. I was worried about it being under 2 hours. We're just gonna hang out for a bit though, and then I'll skedaddle. Let's get some. Let's keep the creepypasta background music. Has anyone seen anything interesting recently? Pokopnyo 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 he ujipke. I don't know why that was funny to me. I really life is boring. Yeah. All I've kind of been watching is just YouTube stuff. I watched this guy do a lecture on something called Kokoro Wish. Which was honestly kind of fucking fascinating. And this lady's like webcomic career is really cool. This shit was like wild. Yeah. Yeah, it's done by Ben Saint. Here, it's the guy who did the what was it? The Sonichu lecture where he went through the entire canon of Sonichu. It's like that, but except it's the canon of the multiverse of Kokoro Wish, and also Pastel Defender Heliotrope. Okay, so imagine Sonichu, but good, with like original characters and stuff, and like really crazy like science fiction concepts that are like really hard for most people to pull off, but yet she actually like does it pretty cool. She like creates her own physics to the world, and like they're it's pretty cool how everything works. Jesse, I'll have to show you at some point. I'll show you this lecture. I know you'll like it since you already like the Sonichu lecture. Here, I'll show you what it is. Show you what video it is. This right here. Birth of a Multiverse. Wrong music. It's just Five Nights at Freddy's song, piano version, The Living Tombstone. Y'all gotta relax. You make me want to put it on repeat, is what you're making me want to do. For real though, this whole thing is actually like fucking fascinating. Fine. Fucking fine. It's gone. You happy? Leave it to watch though? They're only in high school? Not like my middle school days, man. No, he's a little older than that. He's like, what? You're like, what, 1900? Something? And if FNAF when it first came out. I was too, mostly because I actually had a phobia of animatronics. So like seeing a game to play on my actual fears was pretty cool. Guess my age? Let's see. You have to. My guess is that you have to be working, but you're too young to you're too young to be in college. So I would guess 16. That close? All right, yeah. See, I pay attention to things. I pay attention to my chat. Yeah. Oh, see, there's also like half-baked sun cakes, which was like a weird like My Little Pony one that wasn't like very interesting. Oh yeah, another thing about Kokoro Wish that kind of sucks. So she made this she made Kokoro, she made these comics. The coolest one is probably Unicorn Jelly, which she only made for like 3 years. Then she made Pastel Defender Heliotrope, which went on for like 4 years. And then after that, she made like a sub-story to Unicorn Jelly, which lasted a while. And then after that, she has only been writing My Little Pony fan fiction. My Little Pony fan fiction for another fan fiction. So it's like 2 levels deep in My Little Pony fan fiction. She's doing that for fucking 8 going on 9 years now. So it's kind of a shame because her original work was fucking like wild. I just really wanted, like, I saw this whole thing. I was glued to it, and I really just wanted to tell people then. Like, tell people about it, because it's so amazing. It looks like there's, you know, some bad writing and stuff, and, like, whatever. It's a one-person fucking, you know, comic. Like, I'll give it some slack in, like, at least one, you know, one department. And this person, you know, apparently was, like, just, you know, apparently this kind of person who would get some kind of, like, would get made fun of on the internet, because they were kind of weird off, um like, outside of, like, their comics and stuff, and had, like, a weird online presence. I don't know anything about that. The entire lecture was just on Kokoro Wish and unicorn jelly and what was it called? Pastel Defender Heliotrope. All that honestly seemed really interesting. There was, like, this whole thing with, like, the physics and, like, how everyone lives on, like, these world plates, and there was no, like, empty space. Everything was, like, filled with air. Like, it's crazy. She had, like, a whole physics explained and, like, a different, like, I don't know. I'm just fucking fanboying about it right now because it's so it was so interesting to, like, sit through. Also, how deep it goes. The original game that like, she had made in of, like, what was, I can't remember the name, Pastel Defender Heliotrope, actually had a lot of stuff that got reincorporated into the comic later. So, like, she clearly had this planned for fucking a ridiculous amount of time. It's crazy. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about? I would like to do more of these reading streams in the future. If you have any suggestions for things, I prefer things that are, like, bad and funny, like the SCP stream we did months ago, or this AOT. I haven't caught up on it. I don't know what really we talk about it, because I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it. Um, so I watched most recent episode. Oh, you haven't done that either? Whatever. See, I'm thinking what else. If you have anything you ever want to suggest for, like, games or anything, Discord's a great place to do that. There's an entire suggestion channel. It's also just the best place to get a hold of me. I respond to every. Well, I don't respond to everything, but I at least see everything on there. Smite, maybe, like, probably not though, because, like, my experience with Smite was so bad. But maybe I'll help you. Okay, well, maybe. House Flipper, possibly, but it seems like a lot of Unity games don't work very well on in terms of being, like, optimized, so they don't stream very well. They'll cause, like, some skip framed issues. Like, Coin Game had that problem. Yeah. So, you know, it's up in the air whether it works. I usually, when I see Unity, I'm like, I probably can't stream that. My computer isn't even bad. It's just having to do the whole VTuber thing along with um what's my PSN? It's quite literally just Oliver Hoots, capital O, capital H, all one word. I picked a good name because no one's thought of it before me. Okay. Hey, is there? I'd really like suggestions, especially for like reading streams or anything that isn't just video games, because I really love doing streams like this where we're not playing games, we're doing something entirely different. I had a ton of fun with this stream, and I would very much love to keep doing stuff like this. It's usually just trying to figure out what the 3 hour mark. Hell yeah, it's great. I like I said, I honestly thought this was gonna be like half as long. That's good. I really thought we were only gonna do about an hour and a half. Read to Kill a Mockingbird. I'm fairly confident that's not in fair use. So we would actually get in trouble for that. But maybe. It's pretty old. No, it was made in 1960. I wouldn't mind. It's honestly a pretty good book. It's just it's not in the fair use, and literally, yeah, you can get in trouble for reading a book on stream if it's copyright. If it's still in copyright, like watch Shrek ID equals life. What? Yeah, there was what was it? It was Shrek is Life. Oh yeah, probably next week we're going to be doing a watch along stream where we're going to you basically just be able to watch a movie along with me and get my commentary as I go. You have to find your own way to watch the movie, fortunately, because the watch along. But it'll be fine. It's also just gonna be Redline, which is on Amazon, so it's it's not too hard to find. I think most people should be able to get a hold of it. There are other ways to watch it. I'll be watching the Amazon version, so if you want to like be perfectly synced with me, that's the version to go with. Since usually different streaming services run at different frame rates, believe it or not. Streaming on Discord. That's actually something I could do. That's an interesting thought. That could be an interesting thing to do, especially since like we won't get any trouble with the Discord. Worrying if I did get in trouble with the Discord, whatever. But yeah, we'll probably do Redline on Twitch as a watch along next week at some point. Not sure what day, but we'll do it. And then yeah. Like I said, that actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Maybe next time. You shouldn't. My sister has watched stuff with her friends on their servers before. Yeah, like what went wrong? Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. It was a good time. Special thank you to Praise the Moon. Extra special thank you for that gift sub. Really appreciate it. Every sub means a lot. And special thank you to Saluxi for the follow. Also means a lot. Okay. I'll probably be back tomorrow. I'm not sure. If my voice is not doing well tomorrow, I'll post something in Discord. But if it's going fine, I'll probably stream something. You'll know beforehand, though, if I am not. Alright. Love you guys. See you tomorrow. Probably. Goodbye.